let's go over the aspects of an application. We're going to take a look at the typical directory structure of an application. It's going to start with your assembly information, assemblyinfo.cs. You can just open this up within your Visual Studio project. Whenever you create a new project, you're going to see that you have an assemblyinfo.cs file, and this is just going to give metadata information about your project, and this is going to help the .NET environment know about your application, your title, description, company information, copyright, your major and minor version. That's going to describe your assembly further. A lot of Microsoft comments here, and then some security information that you can give a particular security information key file and key name that's going to allow the .NET environment to manage the security of your file, because there's a lot of security built into the .NET framework. And you'll see that this is using the system.reflection and the runtime compiler services. So these are two namespaces that help with actually compiling of your assembly, and also reflection is just what that means. Reflection, as if you're sitting down in a chair in your apartment or house and you're reflecting on yourself. System.reflection is a way to reflect on the assembly itself, on your particular programs and applications, and we'll talk about that later. So for the most part, that's the assemblyinfo.cs file. You see that we have a form, just any old form with a button on it, and this is our form class. And if we actually right-click and view the code, we can see that this is the code that's going to put that form together to do those basic things and give us the ability to do much more advanced things, for example. So that's typical what you'd see there, and you see it's mirroring that directory structure a little bit, because you see that app.icon. This is the icon for the application. You can double click on it and see that we have the ability to edit that icon. So it's just an icon editor, no big deal. But if we go back to our folder, so you're going to find your CS files all over the place. In that resource file, which is going to handle or manage resources, VisualStudio.net is managing your resources of your particular Windows form, and you can find many things within your resource file. Strings, for example, localization strings. You can put images into your assemblies, anything that's binary, for example, flash files within your assembly, and then you're going to be managing resource files. So you may see a lot of those when you're working with a typical Windows form application from within VisualStudio.net. Then you'll see a project file. This is just managing your project within the VisualStudio.net environment. If you're looking at the Primal Code editor, for example, you're going to see a different project file. Other editors may have their own type of project file, but it's really just information for you to manage the project in the directory structure, so that the editor actually knows and understands the files and what is actually being set on this particular project, because you can change preferences and things like that. The user file. No big deal. This is just a file here, XML file, that's giving you information about the debugging and the release versions of your files. Not a big deal. And the solution file here, this is just a way to manage multiple projects within a solution, because you can have very complex projects that do have multiple projects, and this is going to work within VisualStudio.net to manage those solutions within your Solution Explorer, as we've seen in Visual Studio. And you see that we have that app icon here. You can have many, many more files, but for the most part, you're going to have a CS file for each of the classes that are within your assembly. And you have to get used to that. It's different than how you would program in Visual C++ or in another language like C, or even ActionScript, for example. Different languages have different ways of managing all the different classes within the structure of an application. Then you'll notice that bin directory. You'll see this a lot. This is where it's putting that binary file. That's what we're creating. You're going to see, working within Visual Studio, a debug and a release folder. Your release folder is going to contain the same files for the most part as the debug folder. This is going to have your EXEs, your DLLs, and any supporting files that need to be placed in the final application folder. When you actually release something, you'll have your release versions that you can copy. When you're working on your project, you're going to see the often used debug folder, and if you had files within there, you would have your DLLs and EXEs that you can take a peek at and you can actually run them from here. You put your supporting files here as well, like your text files, XML files, Flash files, for example, and everything needs to be run from here just in the debugging environment. You may have to move these files from here to another directory if you want to use them in IIS, for example, the Internet Information Server, or other places where you might actually want to run the code in a different environment. And if we just had the Flash project, for example, you see it looks pretty similar. Bin, debug, and then we have supporting files here. In order to run this application, we need the SWF files here because it's looking for these files in the path of the application. And then you have the supporting files for the Flash interop. This is the ability to use the Flash COM object.